William Franklin Billy Graham Jr. is an American evangelical Christian evangelist ordained as a Southern Baptist minister, who rose to celebrity status in 1949, reaching a core constituency of middle-class, moderately conservative Protestants. He held large indoor and outdoor rallies. Sermons were broadcast on radio and television, some still being rebroadcast today. In his 6 decades of television, Graham is principally known for hosting the annual Billy Graham Crusades, which he began in 1947, until he concluded in 2005 at the time of his retirement. He also hosted the popular radio show Hour of Decision from 1950 to 1954. He repudiated segregation and, in addition to his religious aims, helped shape the worldview of fundamentalists and evangelicals, leading them to appreciate the relationship between the Bible and contemporary secular viewpoints. Graham was a spiritual advisor to American presidents. He was particularly close to Dwight D. Eisenhower, Lyndon Johnson, and Richard Nixon. He insisted on integration for his revivals and crusades in 1953 and invited Martin Luther King, Jr. to preach jointly at a revival in New York City in 1957. Graham bailed King out of jail in the 1960s when King was arrested in demonstrations. He was also lifelong friends with another televangelist, Robert H. Schuller, whom Graham talked into doing his own television ministry. Graham operates a variety of media and publishing outlets. According to his staff, more than 3.2 million people have responded to the invitation at Billy Graham Crusades to accept Jesus Christ as the personal savior. As of 2008, Graham's estimated lifetime audience, including radio and television broadcasts, topped 2.2 billion. Because of his crusades, Graham has preached the gospel to more people in person than anyone in the history of Christianity. Graham has repeatedly been on Gallup's list of most admired men and women. He has appeared on the list 55 times since 1955, more than any other individual in the world. Grant Wacker reports that by the mid-1960s, he had become the great legitimator. By then his presence conferred status on presidents, acceptability on wars, shame on racial prejudice, desirability on decency, dishonor on indecency, and prestige on civic events. Early life. William Franklin Graham, Jr. was born on November 7, 1918. He is the eldest of 4 children born tomorrow and William Franklin Graham, Sr. Graham grew up on a family dairy farm near Charlotte, North Carolina, with his 2 younger sisters and younger brother. In 1927, when he was 8 years old, the family moved about 75 yards from the white frame house to a newly built red brick home. He was raised in the Associate Reformed Presbyterian Church by his parents and is of Scottish and Irish descent. Before this, in 1924, when Graham was only 5, he focused on the outdoors, but rarely did he walk, as he was running and zooming constantly. At the same time, he started as a student at the Sharon Grammar School. Starting to read books from an early age, Graham loved to read novels for boys, especially Tarzan. Like Tarzan, he would hang on the trees, and gave the popular Tarzan yell, scaring both horses and drivers. According to his father, that yelling had led him to become a minister. In 1933, when he was 14, as Prohibition in the United States ended, Graham's father forced him and his sister Catherine to drink beer until they got sick, which created such an aversion that both avoided alcohol and drugs for the rest of their lives. After Graham was turned down for membership in a local youth group because he was too worldly, Albert McMarkin, who worked on the Graham farm, persuaded him to go and see the evangelist Mordecai Ham. According to his autobiography, Graham was converted in 1934 at age 16 during a series of revival meetings in Charlotte led by Ham. After graduating from Sharon High School in May 1936, Graham attended Bob Jones College, then located in Cleveland, Tennessee. After one semester, he found it too legalistic in both coursework and rules. At this time, he was influenced and inspired by Pastor Charlie Young from Eastport Bible Church. He was almost expelled, but Bob Jones, Sr., warned him not to throw his life away. At best, all you could amount to would be a poor country Baptist preacher somewhere out in the sticks. You have a voice that pulls. God can use that voice of yours. He can use it mightily. In 1937, Graham transferred to the Florida Bible Institute. In his autobiography, Graham wrote of receiving his calling on the 18th green of the Temple Terrace Golf and Country Club, which is immediately in front of today's Sutton Hall at Florida College. Reverend Billy Graham Memorial Park was established on the Hillsborough River directly east of the 18th green and across from where Graham often paddled a canoe to a small island in the river, where he would preach to the birds, alligators, and cypress stumps. Graham eventually graduated from Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois with a degree in anthropology in 1943. It was during his time at Wheaton that Graham decided to accept the Bible as the infallible Word of God. Henrietta Mears of the First Presbyterian Church of Hollywood was instrumental in helping Graham wrestle with the issue. He settled it at Forest Home Christian Camp southeast of the Big Bear area in Southern California, a memorial that marks the site of Graham's decision. Family. On August 13, 1943, Graham married Wheaton classmate Ruth Bell, whose parents were Presbyterian missionaries in China. Her father, L. Nelson Bell, was a general surgeon. Ruth Graham died on June 14, 2007, at the age of 87. The Grahams were married 64 years. Graham and his wife had 5 children together: Virginia Leftwick Graham, Anne Graham Alotz, Ruth Graham, Franklin Graham, who serves as president and CEO of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and is president and CEO of International Relief Organization, Samaritan's Purse, and Nelson Edman Graham. Graham has 19 her-children and numerous great-her-children. Notably, his grandson Tullian Chividkian, son of Zizek, was the senior pastor of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, until he was defrocked in June 2015 after admitting to an extramarital affair. Chividkian later filed for divorce from his wife Kim. Ministry career. While attending college, Graham became pastor of the United Gospel Tabernacle and also had other preaching engagements. Graham served briefly as pastor of the First Baptist Church in, not far from Wheaton, in 1943-44. While there, his friend, pastor of the Midwest Bible Church in, told Graham that his radio program, Songs in the Night, was about to be cancelled due to lack of funding. Consulting with the members of his church in Western Springs, Graham decided to take over Johnson's program with financial support from his congregation, launching the new radio program on January 2, 1944, still called Songs in the Night. Graham recruited the bass baritone George Beverly Shea as his director of radio ministry. While the radio ministry continued for many years, Graham decided to move on in early 1945. In 1947, at age 30, he was hired as president of Northwestern Bible College in Minneapolis, at the time the youngest person to serve as a sitting president of any U.S. college or university. Graham served as the president from 1948 to 1952. Initially, Graham intended to become a chaplain in the armed forces, but shortly after applying for a commission, contracted mumps. After a period of recuperation in Florida, he was hired as the first full-time evangelist of the New Youth for Christ, co-founded by Tory Johnson and the Canadian evangelist Charles Templeton. Graham traveled throughout both the United States and Europe as an YFCI evangelist. Unlike many evangelists, he had little formal theological training. Templeton applied to Princeton Theological Seminary for an advanced theological degree and urged Graham to do so as well, but he declined as he was already serving as the president of Northwestern Bible College. Graham scheduled a series of revival meetings in Los Angeles in 1949, for which he erected circus tents in a parking lot. He attracted national media coverage, especially in the conservative Hearst chain, although Hearst and Graham never met. The crusade event ran for 8 weeks, 5 weeks longer than planned. Graham became a national figure with heavy coverage from the wire services and national magazines. Crusades. Since his ministry began in 1947, Graham conducted more than 400 crusades in 185 countries and territories on 6 continents. The first Billy Graham Crusade, held September 13 to 21, 1947, in the Civic Auditorium in Grand Rapids, Michigan, was attended by 6,000 people. Graham was 28 years old. He called them crusades, after the medieval Christian forces who conquered Jerusalem. He would rent a large venue, such as a stadium, park, or street. As the sessions became larger, he arranged a group of up to 5,000 people to sing in a choir. He would preach the gospel and invite people to come forward. Such people were called inquirers and were given the chance to speak one-on-one with a counselor to clarify questions and pray together. The inquirers were often given a copy of the Gospel of John or a Bible study booklet. In Moscow, in 1992, 1/4 of the 155,000 people in Graham's audience went forward at his call. During his crusades, he has frequently used the altar call song, "Just As I Am." Graham was offered a 5-year, $1 million contract from NBC to appear on television opposite Arthur Godfrey, but he turned it down in favor of continuing his touring revivals because of his prearranged commitments. Graham had missions in London, which lasted 12 weeks, and a New York City mission in Madison Square Garden in 1957, which ran nightly for 16 weeks. Student ministry. Graham spoke at InterVarsity Christian Fellowship's Urbana Student Missions Conference at least 9 times. In 1948, 1957, 1961, 1964, 1976, 1979, 1981, 1984, and 1987. At each Urbana conference he challenged the thousands of attendees to make a commitment to follow Jesus Christ for the rest of their lives, often quoting a 6-word phrase written in the Bible of an heir to the Borden milk fortune, William Borden, who died in Egypt on his way to the mission field. No reserves, no retreat, no regrets. Graham also held evangelistic meetings on a number of college campuses. At the University of Minnesota during InterVarsity's Year of Evangelism in 1950-51, a 4-day mission at Yale University in 1957, and a week-long series of meetings at the University of North Carolina's Carmichael Auditorium in September 1982. In 1955 he was invited by students to lead the mission to Cambridge University, arranged by the CICCU, with the London pastor theologian John Stott as his chief assistant. This invitation was greeted with much disapproval in the correspondence columns of the Times. Evangelistic Association. In 1950, Graham founded the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association with its headquarters in Minneapolis. The association relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1999. BGEA ministries have included Hour of Decision, a weekly radio program broadcast around the world for more than 50 years, mission television specials broadcast in almost every market in the US and Canada, a syndicated newspaper column, My Answer, carried by newspapers across the United States and distributed by Tribune Media Services, Decision Magazine, the official publication of the association. Christianity Today was started in 1956 with Carl F. H. Henry as its first editor. Passageway.org, the website for a youth discipleship program created by BGEA. Worldwide Pictures, which has produced and distributed more than 130 films. In April 2013, the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association started My Hope with Billy Graham, the largest outreach in its history, encouraging church members to spread the gospel in small group meetings after showing a video message by Graham. The idea is for Christians to follow the example of the disciple Matthew in the New Testament and spread the gospel in their own homes. The video, called The Cross, is the main program in the My Hope America series and was also broadcast the week of Graham's 95th birthday. In an email interview with WND, Graham read that we are close to the end of the age. Civil rights movement. During a 1953 rally in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Graham tore down the ropes that organizers had erected to separate the audience into racial sections. He recounted in his memoirs that he told two ushers to leave the barriers down, or you can go on and have the revival without me. Quote, he warned a white audience, we have been proud and thought we were better than any other race, any other people. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to stumble into hell because of our pride. In 1957, Graham's stance towards integration became more publicly shown when he allowed African American ministers Thomas Kilgore and Gardner Taylor to serve as members of his New York Crusades executive committee and invited the Rev. Martin Luther King, Jr., whom he first met during the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, to join him in the pulpit at his 16-week revival in New York City, where 2.3 million gathered at Madison Square Garden, Yankee Stadium, and Times Square to hear them. Graham recalled in his autobiography that during this time, he and King developed a close friendship and that he was eventually one of the few people who referred to King as Mike, a nickname which King asked only his closest friends to call him. Following King's assassination in 1968, Graham warned that America had lost a social leader and a prophet. In private, Graham would also advise King and other members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Despite the friendship, tensions between Graham and King emerged in 1958 when the sponsoring committee of a crusade which took place in San Antonio, Texas on July 25 arranged for Graham to be introduced by that state's segregationist governor, Price Daniel. On July 23, King sent a letter to Graham and informed him that allowing Daniel to speak at a crusade which occurred the night before the state's Democratic primary can well be interpreted as your endorsement of racial segregation and discrimination. Graham's advisor, Grady Wilson, replied to King that, even though we do not see eye to eye with him on every issue, we still love him in Christ. Though Graham's appearance with Daniel dashed King's hopes of holding joint crusades with Graham in the Deep South, the two still remained friends, and King told a Canadian television audience the following year that Graham had taken a very strong stance against segregation. Graham and King would also come to differ on the Vietnam War. After King's Beyond Vietnam's speech denouncing U.S. intervention in Vietnam, Graham castigated him and others for the criticism of American foreign policy. By the middle of 1960, King and Graham traveled together to the 10th Baptist World Congress of the Baptist World Alliance. In 1963, Graham posted bail for King to be released from jail during the civil rights protests in Birmingham. Graham held integrated crusades in Birmingham, Alabama on Easter 1964 in the aftermath of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and toured Alabama again in the wake of the violence that accompanied the first Selma to Montgomery March in 1965. Graham's faith prompted his maturing view of race and segregation. He told a member of the KKK that integration was necessary primarily for religious reasons. There is no scriptural basis for segregation, Graham argued. The ground at the foot of the cross is level, and it touches my heart when I see whites standing shoulder to shoulder with blacks at the cross. Lausanne movement. The friendship between Graham and John Stott led to a further partnership in the Lausanne movement, of which Graham was founder. It built on Graham's 1966 World Congress on Evangelism in Berlin. In collaboration with Christianity Today, Graham convened what Time magazine described as a formidable forum, possibly the widest-ranging meeting of Christians ever held, with 2,700 participants from 150 nations gathering for the International Congress on World Evangelization. This took place in Lausanne, Switzerland, and the movement which ensued took its name from the host city. Its purpose was to strengthen the global church for world evangelization, and to engage ideological and sociological trends which bore on this. Graham invited Stott to be chief architect of the Lausanne Covenant, which issued from the Congress and which, according to Graham, helped challenge and unite evangelical Christians in the great task of world evangelization. The movement remains a significant fruit of Graham's legacy, with a presence in nearly every nation. Multiple roles. Graham played multiple roles that reinforced each other. Grant Wacker identifies 8 major roles he played: preacher, icon, southerner, entrepreneur, architect, pilgrim, pastor, and finally his widely recognized status as America's Protestant patriarch, on a par with Martin Luther King and Pope John Paul II. Graham as bridge builder deliberately reached into the secular world. For example, as entrepreneur, he built his own pavilion for the 1964 New York World's Fair. He appeared as a guest on a 1969 Woody Allen television special, where he joined the comedian in a witty exchange on theological matters. During the Cold War, Graham the bridge builder became the first evangelist of note to speak behind the Iron Curtain, addressing large crowds in countries throughout Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union, calling for peace. During the apartheid era, Graham consistently refused to visit South Africa until its government allowed integrated seating for audiences. During his first crusade there in 1973, he openly denounced apartheid. Graham also corresponded with imprisoned South African leader Nelson Mandela during the latter's 27-year sentence. In 1984, he led a series of meetings in the United Kingdom summer, called Mission England, using outdoor football grounds as venues. Graham was interested in fostering evangelism around the world. In 1983, 1986 and 2000 he sponsored, organized and paid for massive training conferences for Christian evangelists from around the world, with the largest representations of nations ever held until that time. Over 157 nations were gathered in 2000 at the Ray Convention Center in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. At one revival in Seoul, South Korea, Graham attracted more than 1 million people to a single service. He appeared in China in 1988. For Ruth, this was a homecoming, since she had been born in China to missionary parents. He appeared in North Korea in 1992. On October 15, 1989, Graham received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Graham was the only minister functioning in that capacity to receive one. On September 22, 1991, Graham held his largest event in North America on the Great Lawn of New York's Central Park. City officials estimated more than 250,000 in attendance. In 1998, Graham spoke at TED to a crowd of scientists and philosophers. On September 14, 2001, in the aftermath of the September 11 attacks, Graham was invited to lead a service at Washington National Cathedral, which was attended by President George W. Bush and past and present leaders. He also spoke at the memorial service following the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. On June 24–26, 2005, Billy Graham began what he has said would be his last North American crusade, 3 days at the Flushing Meadows Corona Park in New York City. But on the weekend of March 11–12, 2006, Billy Graham held the Festival of Hope with his son, Franklin Graham. The festival was held in New Orleans, which was recovering from Hurricane Katrina. Graham prepared one last sermon, My Hope America, released on DVD and played around America and possibly worldwide between November 7–10, 2013, November 7th being his 95th birthday, hoping to cause a revival. It was aired on several networks including Fox News. Illness. Graham has had Parkinson's disease since 1992. Retirement. Graham said that his planned retirement was because of his failing health. In August 2005, Graham appeared at the groundbreaking for his library in Charlotte, North Carolina. Then 86, he used a walker during the ceremony. On July 9, 2006, he spoke at the Metro Maryland Franklin Graham Festival, held in Baltimore, Maryland, at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. In April 2010, Graham, at 91 and with substantial vision and hearing loss, made a rare public appearance at the rededication of the renovated Billy Graham Library. There had been controversy over Graham's proposed burial place. He announced in June 2007 that he and his wife would be buried alongside each other at the Billy Graham Library in his hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina. Graham's younger son Ed had argued with older son Franklin about whether burial at a library would be appropriate. Ruth Graham had said that she wanted to be buried not in Charlotte but in the mountains near Asheville, North Carolina, where she had lived for many years. Ned supported his mother's choice. Novelist Patricia Cornwell, a family friend, also opposed burial at the library, calling it a tourist attraction. Franklin wanted his parents to be buried at the library site. At the time of Ruth Graham's death, it was announced that they would be buried at the library site. Graham has preached Christianity to live audiences of nearly 215 million people in more than 185 countries and territories through various meetings, including BMS World Mission and Global Mission. He has also reached hundreds of millions more through television, video, film, and webcasts.